The tension in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I sat across from Harlan, my estranged husband, trying to keep my emotions in check as he droned on about his grand plans. "This luxury rehab center is going to put our little town on the map," he proclaimed, that slimy grin plastered across his face. "I've got investors lining up to be a part of it." My hands clenched under the table. Of course, his big idea involved lining his own pockets, not caring whose lives he disrupted in the process. "But Harlan," I interjected, struggling to remain calm, "that farmhouse has been in my family for generations. My parents' whole lives were spent tending to that land. You can't just tear it down." Dax and Ivy, my teenage kids, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was the kind of drama no child should have to witness between their parents, but Harlan seemed oblivious to their discomfort. Harlan scoffed, fixing me with that conniving glare that made my skin crawl. "Your parents' legacy?" he spat. "More like a dilapidated money pit holding us back. I've got the chance to finally do something worthwhile with that property." My blood boiled at his cavalier dismissal of everything that house represented to me. My childhood, my roots, my parents' life's work. All he could see was dollar signs. "It's not just about money," I exploded, slamming my palm on the table. Dax and Ivy jumped in their seats. "That farmhouse is our family heritage. It means something." "Yeah?" Harlan's lips curled into a sneer. "Well, it's my name on the deed, which means I get to make the calls around here. This rehab center is happening whether you like it or not." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. When had the man I married become such a self-absorbed, greedy bastard? I opened my mouth to protest further, but the dejected looks on Dax and Ivy's faces stopped me. As much as I wanted to continue fighting, I didn't want to put them through any more of this toxic drama tonight. I pushed back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "You know what, Harlan? Do whatever you want, but don't expect any support from me on this." Snatching up my purse, I stormed out of the dining room, the muffled sound of Harlan's laughter echoing behind me. My fists clenched at my sides as I fought back angry tears. He thought he had won this battle, but he was gravely mistaken. That old farmhouse represented everything my parents had built through decades of backbreaking work, the roots, the memories, the soul of our family. I wouldn't stand by and let Harlan's greed destroy it all in the name of profiting off people's suffering. Not without one hell of a fight. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Harlan was being uncharacteristically low-key, no doubt trying to avoid another booty-owning match after our disastrous dinner. But I knew that smug snake was just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to slither forward with his precious rehab center plans. I wasn't about to just sit back and take it, though. If he thought he could bulldoze over my family's legacy so easily, he had another thing coming. It started with little things at first. Reevaluating our finances, I noticed irregularities, strange transfers, payments to unfamiliar companies. Confronting Harlan only led to him lashing out, accusing me of nagging and not trusting him. "It's basic business dealings, Alara. Not that you'd understand anything about building an empire." Those words stung, but I tried not to let it show. "This has nothing to do with trust, Harlan. I'm simply asking where our money is going." He brushed me off with a demeaning chortle. "Don't worry that pretty little head of yours. Just let me handle things, okay, dear?" The way he always talked down to me, treating me like a clueless child rather than his wife, it made my blood boil. But I knew pushing further would only lead to another explosive argument, so I bottled up my anger. For now. Then came the night I overheard Harlan's conversation with his sleazeball buddy Travis. I'll never forget the smugness in his tone as he bragged about bleeding me dry. "Once I've transferred the deed over solely to my name, Alara won't be able to do a damn thing. That little nuisance will be out of the picture for good." My heart stopped. He was planning on cutting me out completely, leaving me with nothing while he tore down my parents' legacy to build his tacky rehab palace. In that moment, any shed of respect or love I'd had left for Harlan evaporated. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just being greedy and inconsiderate, he was being malicious and cruel. Using our marriage vows as a weapon to steal from me and erase everything my family had built. I wanted nothing more than to burst into that room and unleash the fury building up inside me. To scream, to rage, to make him feel 1 ounce of the hurt he was inflicting on me. But I didn't. As the weight of Harlan's betrayal threatened to crush me, a strange calmness washed over me instead. Screaming would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under my skin. No, I would be strong. I would be smart. If he wanted to wage war, then war was what he'd get. Quietly, I retreated back down the hall before either of those snakes could spot me eavesdropping. They thought they were so clever, but they had no idea what was coming for them. A faint smile played across my lips as their chortling laughter echoed behind me. In that moment, I made a vow to myself. Using every ounce of my intelligence and determination, I would take that smug snake Harlan down. He wanted to play dirty? I'd bury him. The next morning, I called a family meeting with Dax and Ivy. It was time to lay everything out on the table and bring them into the fight. "Your father has been lying to us," I stated bluntly as we gathered in the living room. "He's been secretly plotting to take full control of the farmhouse property." Ivy's eyes widened in shock, but Dax just frowned and nodded slowly. I knew something shady was going on. I overheard him on the phone the other night arguing about handling the Alara situation. My heart clenched hearing my own name being treated like a mere obstacle to be overcome. Harlan's deceit cut deeper than I could have imagined. He's aiming to cut me out completely so he can demolish the farmhouse for his rehab center ambitions. Without any legal claim, there's nothing I can do to stop him. Dax slammed his fist on the couch cushion. "That lying bastard! After everything you sacrificed for this family while he was off chasing get-rich-quick schemes, he doesn't deserve." He trailed off, anger causing his voice to shake. "We can't let him get away with this," Ivy stated firmly, conviction burning in her eyes. "Mom, that farmhouse is your heritage. Grandma and Grandpa's life was in those lands. We have to protect it." Hearing the determination in my daughter's voice, I felt a surge of pride mix with the simmering fury towards Harlan. She may have been young, but Ivy understood the importance of not letting our family history be erased. "You're absolutely right," I declared, straightening my back. "Which is why I need both of you on board with taking Harlan down. We're going to expose every last one of his underhanded tactics." Dax raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And just how do you plan on doing that? Pretty sure dear old Dad has his shady business dealings locked up tighter than Fort Knox." A grim smile crossed my lips. "Let's just say I have some tricks up my sleeve, too. Starting with carefully documenting every inconsistency I find in our finances, no matter how small. Harlan always was sloppy about covering his tracks completely." I proceeded to lay out the start of my plan, meticulously building an evidence trail of Harlan's financial manipulation, from questionable payments and transfers to the shady characters he was courting as rehab center investors. Dax was put in charge of thoroughly combing through all communication records, emails, texts, phone calls, looking for any trace of Harlan's deceitful intentions and dealings. Ivy, ever the tech genius, would backtrack all digital money movements to ensure we caught every inconsistency. With her skills, even Harlan's feeble efforts at coding expenses wouldn't be able to hide from us. As we finalized assigning roles and responsibilities, a new sense of determination filled the room. Harlan had clearly underestimated just how ferociously we would fight to take him down. Big mistake. "This is going to be one hell of a battle," Dax mused grimly. I met his gaze, letting the full force of my resolve burn through. "Then it's a good thing he messed with the wrong family. Harlan wanted a war. He'll get one he never saw coming. With a united front, we shook on our pact. There would be no more holding back. Harlan had awoken a vengeful force he couldn't possibly comprehend. Everything he'd worked towards was about to unravel by his own narcissistic greed. Let the games begin. A few days later, I finally worked up the nerve to confront Harlan directly about his betrayal. I'd spent too many nights stewing in anger, imagining all the ways I could rip him a new one. But I needed to play this confrontation carefully if I wanted to catch him off guard. "Harlan, we need to talk," I stated firmly as I entered the den, jaw clenched in determination. He barely looked up from his laptop, offering a dismissive grunt. "What is it now, Alara? I'm kind of busy here." I could feel my temper already starting to flare at his indifference, but I took a steadying breath. "Don't take the bait. Not yet." Too busy to discuss your secret dealings to cut me out of the farmhouse deed? I asked, carefully watching his expression. That seemed to finally get his attention. Harlan's head snapped up, his brow furrowing in that familiar look of faux innocence he used when caught in a lie. What are you talking about? There are no secret dealings. I leveled him with a cold stare. Don't play dumb with me, Harlan. I know all about your pathetic schemes to take full control of my family's property behind my back. For a split second, I saw a flicker of panic flash across his features before the mask of indignation slid back into place. Alara, you're being completely irrational right now. Can it, Harlan? My composure finally snapped as I slammed my palms on the desk, causing him to flinch back in his chair. I know you've been manipulating the finances, chatting up shady investors, all so you can demolish that farmhouse for your precious little vanity rehab project. Harlan opened his mouth, no doubt to spew more lies and feeble justifications. But I wasn't having any of it, not this time. You make me sick, I snarled, all the rage and anguish I'd been bottling up finally boiling over. Planning to tear down a piece of my family's legacy all along, lying to my face every step of the way. You're nothing but a selfish, immoral snake. He recoiled slightly at the venom in my words, then quickly straightened as that cocky, condescending sneer spread across his lips. Well, looks like the little woman has finally grown some claws. But you don't scare me, Alara. Not even close. Despite the bravado, I could detect a slight quiver of uncertainty in his voice. Good, he should be worried. You think you've got everything all figured out, don't you? Harlan leaned back with a contemptuous chuckle. Newsflash, Princess, I don't need your approval or permission to do anything with that property. It's mine, fair and square. My blood boiled at his arrogance. Did he really think underhanded manipulation made his claim fair? But before I could retort, he was leaning towards me with that soulless grin that made my skin crawl. In fact, you're the one who's about to get a rude wake-up call, he promised in a low, silky tone. I've got everything legally locked up tighter than a drum. By the time I'm through, you're going to be the one left with nothing while I build my empire. We were practically nose to nose now, his putrid breath washing over me as he hissed out the final threat. You think you can take me on, sweetheart? By all means, try. But don't be surprised when I bury you along with your precious little memories. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm going to enjoy every second of watching you lose everything. Hatred burned in my chest, barely contained rage roiling within me at his vicious, vindictive words. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to unleash the full force of my fury upon this wretched, soulless man I'd once loved, but I didn't. Slowly, I straightened up and took a step back, returning his venom-filled glare with a calm, level look. You seem pretty confident, don't you, Harlan? I stated, my voice dangerously even. We'll see how long that smug smile lasts once the truth about your shady dealings comes to light. You wanted a war? You're going to get one. Giving him one final look of pure, undisguised disgust, I turned and strode from the den, my high heels clicking determinedly against the hardwood. Harlan may have thought he held all the cards, but he had hugely underestimated me. The game was on now, and I fully intended to be the last one standing when the dust cleared. After my explosive showdown with Harlan, I knew I needed to take our fight to the next level. As much as Dax and Ivy's support bolstered my determination, we couldn't take Harlan down alone. We needed reinforcements. First on my list was my best friend Alicia, a sharp-tongued lawyer who had been watching this whole saga unfold with disdain for my snake of a husband. As expected, she jumped at the chance to help take Harlan down a peg. That scumbag has had this coming for a long time, Alicia said with relish when I looped her in on our scheme. Just tell me what kind of legal roadblocks we need to throw his way. Her wolfish grin was one I'd seen many times before, usually right before she went for the jugular in court. Harlan wouldn't know what hit him once we sicked Alicia's legal prowess on his shoddy cover-ups. Next, I reached out to some of my oldest friends from my nursing days, Jacqueline, Maria, and Sandy. While we had drifted apart over the years due to work and raising families, they were still the most loyal, iron-willed women I knew. When I laid out the battle plan, how Harlan aimed to destroy my family legacy in his ruthless pursuit of profits, Their reactions were awe-inspiring blend of outrage and grim determination. "Say no more, girl," Jacqueline stated, pulling me into a bear hug. "That bastard's not going to know what hit him when we're done rallying the troops." Sandy cracked her knuckles meaningfully. "I've been waiting years to give that smug prick a piece of my mind. Count me in." Maria simply nodded, her jaw set in a hard line. "Para la familia. Let's burn that cabron to the ground." With a fiercely loyal crew now assembled, the real planning began. We'd hit Harlan from every angle possible. Alicia laying the groundwork for our legal offensive, while Jacqueline and the others used their vast network of contacts in our small town to rally public opinion solidly against him. "Harlan may have his pockets lined with cash, but we've got the most powerful weapons of all, the truth and the will of the people," Alicia declared. "Once we expose every last one of his shady schemes, he won't be able to show his weaselly face in this town again." Over the next few days, the fight was taken to Harlan on all fronts. Damning documents and financial records detailing his fraud were anonymously leaked to the local press. Community meetings were organized to rally support for protecting my family's legacy at all costs against Harlan's ambitions. Scathing social media campaigns exposing what a con artist he truly was began spreading like wildfire. At the same time, Alicia was working every back door to halt permits and dispute property claims, throwing up every possible legal roadblock to Harlan's rehab center dreams, while we dug up more concrete evidence of his lies and manipulation. As the townsfolk turned decisively against Harlan and his partners started growing nervous over the mounting allegations, you could practically smell the desperation rolling off that weasel. He knew he was losing his grip on the situation, but was too proud and arrogant to gracefully admit defeat. Which was exactly what we wanted. The slimy rat backed into a corner, scrabbling for any advantage as we slowly tightened the vice around his schemes. Of course, the attacks and libelous claims started flying once Harlan realized what an impenetrable defense we had formed. Cries of modern-day witch hunt and embellished accusations that I had grifted money in retaliation were aimed at trying to sow seeds of doubts, but we stood united against the onslaught. Harlan could grasp at whatever pitiful straws of denial he wanted. In a matter of days, we had already dismantled most of his rehab center plans while simultaneously turning almost the entire town against him. "He's getting desperate," I noted to Dax and Ivy as news dropped of another one of Harlan's investors pulling out amidst the cloud of suspicion. "Getting sloppy, too." My lips curved into a thin, predatory smile. "Which means his defenses are finally cracking open for our killing strike. Watch closely, kids. This is how we draw the venom from a snake before going in for the kill." The battle was far from over, but the war had finally swung in our favor, and I was going to savor every well-deserved second of Harlan's downfall. It all came to a head at the community center meeting Alicia had organized. Creating a media spectacle was her specialty, and this was shaping up to be her magnum opus of public lashings. As I entered the packed auditorium that night, the stuffy air was thick with anticipation and accusation. All eyes turned towards me, hushed murmurs filling the space as I made my way to the front. The townspeople had gotten wind that explosive revelations about Harlan were coming, and you could feel the thirst for blood in the air. I wasn't alone, however. Dax, Ivy, Alicia, and my former nursing crew stood in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder, as we ascended the stage. We were bathed in the harsh spotlight when I finally stepped up to the podium, casting shadows that danced ominously behind us. Without preamble, I launched right into my opening salvo. "Good evening, everyone. I wish I could say I gathered you all here tonight under better circumstances, but the situation we are facing is one of great consequence." My eyes swept the crowd, taking in the rapt expressions locked onto me, before continuing in a voice that carried firmly to the rafters. "Many of you are already aware of my husband Harlan's ambitions to demolish my family's ancestral farmhouse in order to build a luxury rehabilitation center." I paused, letting the weight of that statement hang in the air as cries of outrage rippled through the crowd. Seizing the momentum, I pressed on, voice rising with conviction. "What you may not know are the depths of deceit, fraud, and manipulation Harlan stooped to in order to make this happen. Evidence we have uncovered shows a long pattern of shady dealings, underhanded tactics, and blatant lies, all in the name of lining his pockets at the expense of our community and my family's heritage. A hush fell over the auditorium as I reached into my blazer pocket and extracted a thick manila folder, holding it aloft for all to see. In here are documents, financial records, communication trails, all detailing Harlan's litany of moral and potentially criminal transgressions, from money laundering and backroom deals with known fraudsters, to pretending to be the sole owner of the property while actively working to cut me out and dissolve my legal claim. Gasps and murmurs exploded around the auditorium, shock and disdain on every face. I pressed my advantage, pitching my voice to be heard over the din. This man is a charlatan and a criminal who has lied, deceived, and undermined every step of the way in his blind greed. Are we going to let his toxicity ravage the very soul of our community while he gets away with it? No. The crowd roared as one, a deafening chorus of outrage. From the side of the stage, I saw Harlan finally stumble in, eyes wild and face flushed. He had clearly caught wind of our little truth rally and come to do damage control. Too little, far too late. "You lying bitch," he snarled as realization dawned, fight eyes bulging. "You can't do this. I'll bury you for this, I swear." "Save it, Snake." Alicia's voice cut through the commotion like a whip crack as she strode forward, holding up a hand to silence the angry mob. "We've got you dead to rights on a laundry list of charges. From shady business dealings to criminal fraud, you're going to be lucky if you don't end up in prison after this is through." Harlan looked around wildly, seeming to finally grasp just how tenuous his situation had become. I watched with cold satisfaction as the blood drained from his face. "Give it up, Harlan," I stated, my voice dripping with contempt. "Your shit show of lies and deception is over. The jig is up. Everyone can see you for the duplicitous, bottom-feeding scumbag you truly are." His mouth worked uselessly for a moment before snarling, pointed a quivering finger at me. You'll regret this, Alara. You hear me? This isn't over by a long shot." But his threats rang hollow, drowned out by a thunderous wave of boos and jeers cascading from the enraged townsfolk. As security finally arrived to escort the ranting Harlan away, I stood tall and fixed him with a look of pure, undisguised loathing. I had dismantled every last one of his lies and defenses. For the first time, he was utterly defenseless against the consequences of his villainy, and I was going to savor every damn second of his well-deserved downfall. After the explosive community meeting, Harlan's world came crashing down in spectacular fashion. You didn't need a crystal ball to see the karmic reckoning that was barreling towards that contemptible snake. Within days, the avalanche of press coverage exposing his vast array of fraud and deception caused a catastrophic domino effect. Investors and business partners scattered like roaches, suspending dealings and distancing themselves from the deepening pit of scandal. Banks froze his assets and lines of credit pending multiple investigations. The rehab center project laid in ruins, all permits revoked amidst the firestorm. And that was just the financial devastation. As the lurid allegations piled up, everything from laundering money for offshore drug cartels to funneling bribes through phony construction funds, the legal walls closed in with terrifying swiftness. Furious investors filed a wave of lawsuits demanding Harlan's head, while the district attorney's office secured a grand jury indictment on nearly 24 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and more. You could practically smell the stench of desperation emanating from Harlan as it all unraveled before his eyes, thanks to his own rampant arrogance and greed. "You'll pay for this, Alara," he'd frequently screech at me in chilling displays of rage, spittle flying. "You'll rue the day you started this war. I'll make sure you end up destitute and alone, living in that piece of crap farmhouse." All I could do was sneer back at his pathetic flailings, enjoying every agonizing second of his meltdown. "Is that so?" I'd reply calmly, basking in his manic fury. "Last I checked, I'm the one who still has custody of the kids, financial security, and the deed to that crap farmhouse you were ready to demolish. You, on the other hand..." I leaned back, eyeing his disheveled, unraveling appearance. "Well, you seem to be doing a fine job of self-destructing all on your own." I'd leave him to stew in his own toxic cesspool of hatred while I moved full steam ahead with reclaiming my family legacy. With Harlan's nefarious ambitions now a smoldering wreckage, it was full steam ahead on restoring the precious farmhouse to its former glory, to honor my parents' memory and provide a revitalizing community gathering place. Of course, Harlan tried every desperate gambit imaginable to regain some semblance of leverage or control. Mostly pathetic smear tactics and attempts to turn Dax and Ivy against me through vile manipulation. But his venom had lost its bite. The kids saw him for the soulless, morally bankrupt specimen he truly was. In the end, his towering ego crippled him when it came time to negotiate custody and divorce terms. While my team played hardball to rightfully secure nearly everything, Harlan was too poisoned by spite to make any logical capitulations. He pathetically tried to contest Alicia's ironclad case for how much punishment he deserved, ranting and raving about unfair treatment as each ruling systematically stripped him of money, property, and professional clout. I'd be lying if I said I didn't take immense satisfaction in watching that surly worm finally receive his comeuppance. It was nothing less than he deserved after so selfishly trying to burn down my family's treasured history in his warpath of greed and vanity. As for me, I rebounded splendidly from the wreckage Harlan left behind. Thanks to the groundswell of local support and Alicia's legal mastery, my claim to the farmhouse was solidified while my nursing credentials remained unblemished. The perfect foundation on which to execute my new vision for the revered property. With the community's help, the farmhouse underwent a transformation into a rustic but vibrant wellness center, offering holistic services, community events, and opportunities for local youth to connect with their rural heritage. A living embodiment of the values my parents instilled in me, allowing their hard-won legacy to be reborn into something even more meaningful. As for Harlan, his fall from grace was as brutal as it was deserved. The walls finally closed in with an 18-year prison sentence after his high-profile trial laid bare the full extent of his sociopathic depravity. His professional reputation was left in permanent ruin, reduced to a cautionary tale. One final delicious bit of karma? Dax and Ivy leveled him with chilling silence when he tried to grovel for their sympathies with smarmy calls from prison, the once infallible master manipulator unable to wriggle his way back into their good graces. After everything, that smug, soulless charlatan got exactly what he deserved, a life torn asunder by his own corrosive deceptions and greed. While I had risen from the rubble he tried to leave me in, creating new hopes and dreams from the foundations he aimed to destroy. Perhaps there was such a thing as justice and karma in this world, after all. All it took was the unstoppable force of a mother's love, fueled by the righteous determination to protect her family's sacred legacy. It was a crisp autumn morning when we held the grand reopening ceremony for the revitalized farmhouse, now christened Willow Creek Wellness Center. Though Harlan's scorched earth campaign had left the property in desperate need of repairs and renovations, we had persevered to breathe new life into my family's cherished legacy. As I stepped up to the podium that day, surrounded by the beaming faces of the townspeople who had rallied behind me, I couldn't help but feel immense pride at what we had achieved together. This wasn't just a new chapter, but a hard-won resurrection from the ashes of Harlan's selfish ambition. To all of you here today, words can't express how grateful I am for your support over these past months, I began, my voice wavering slightly with emotion. When faced with the very real threat of seeing this farmhouse, a piece of my family's heart and soul, torn asunder in the name of greed, you stood united. You stood for the importance of preserving our community's history and values. I paused, feeling Dax and Ivy's reassuring presence beside me as the crowd cheered their affirmation. In that moment, the nightmare of Harlan's betrayal felt like a distant specter, no longer able to diminish this hard-fought victory. Thanks to your resilience and refusal to let corporate excess trample on what makes this town great, we have reclaimed this invaluable space, I continued, fresh conviction rising in my voice. No longer will it serve as a monument to one man's ego, but as a place of healing, of unity, of rediscovering our roots. Willow Creek will be our community's lighthouse, a sanctuary where we can reconnect with ourselves, our neighbors, and the unbreakable threads that have bound us together for generations. More roars of approval and thunderous applause. Despite Harlan throwing everything he had at trying to divide and conquer us, His scorched earth tactics had only galvanized the community's strength and resolve. Karma indeed was a harsh mistress. After the ribbon cutting, I took time to greet and personally thank as many well-wishers as possible. From Alicia, whose legal prowess had been invaluable, to Jacqueline and my other nurses-turned-warriors on the front lines, so many rallied to this cause when Harlan thought he could steamroll right over my family's legacy. Speaking of that wretched snake, I couldn't help but smirk thinking about how he was spending this beautiful day. Rotting in a dingy cell, I'd wager, still trying in vain to wrap his mind around how I'd outmaneuvered him at every single turn. Let him stew and boil over with hatred. I had emerged from his smear campaign completely vindicated, stronger than ever before. And surrounding me now was a living, breathing symbol of that, the culmination of my parents' lifelong efforts and my own perseverance in the face of cruelty. He never stood a chance against you, did he? I turned to see Dax watching me with an odd look of contemplation, perhaps sensing where my mind had drifted. Before I could reply, Ivy sidled up and playfully nudged her brother. "Are you kidding? I figured Mom would bury that jackass from the moment his stupid scheme came to light." "Oh, ye of little faith," I chuckled, pulling them both into a tight embrace. To be fair, even I wasn't certain I had the fortitude at first to wage this war, but when I saw the two of you standing by me without hesitation, everything became clear. I pulled back, holding them at arm's length as memories of those initial dark days flashed in my mind's eye. When Harlan's true nature was laid bare, when he tried to strip me of my identity and destroy everything our family holds dear, that was when I knew this fight was about so much more than just a property deed. It was about not letting that soulless parasite kill the spirit and legacy your grandparents bestowed on me. Dax and Ivy exchanged knowing looks, seeming to gain a deeper understanding of the cataclysmic forces that had been unleashed. "I may have dealt the decisive blows," I continued solemnly, "but it was our united front as a family that gave me the strength and determination to dismantle his poisonous schemes piece by piece. Without you two by my side, righting Harlan's wrongs may have broken me." For a long moment we stood in silence, a tear glistening at the corner of my eye as I absorbed the symbolic weight of the sprawling farmhouse campus surrounding us. It would never again serve as a monument to greed, consumed by one man's vanity. No, this place had been reborn, a living, breathing embodiment of the values that could never be erased, no matter how viciously they were attacked. It stood as testament to the unbreakable endurance of family, of truth, and of carving our own legacies in defiance of those who tried to steal them away. And I couldn't have asked for a greater triumph to call my own. "You're overreacting as always. Can't you just get over it and move on?" Bryce's dismissive words hit me like a slap across the face. I stared at him in disbelief, my chest tightening as the all-too-familiar frustration boiled within me. How many times had I pleaded with him to understand what I was going through with my health issues? How many nights did I cry myself to sleep, longing for his compassion and support? "Get over it," I echoed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Bryce, I'm in constant pain. The fatigue is crippling. I can't just get over a chronic condition that modern medicine still doesn't fully comprehend." Bryce rolled his eyes, his expression a mixture of annoyance and indifference. Yeah, I've heard it all before. You really need to stop using that as an excuse for everything." My hands trembled as a wave of anger washed over me. An excuse? Did he truly believe I was making up the suffering I endured day after day, year after year? "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice quivering with pent-up emotion. "I'm done trying to make you understand something you clearly have no interest in comprehending." Bryce scoffed and turned his attention back to the television, effectively dismissing me and my struggles once again. I stormed out of the living room, fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. As I made my way to the bedroom, memories of our once loving relationship flooded my mind. Where was the man who had vowed to love and support me through sickness and health? The one who had held me close and promised to always be by my side? That man was long gone, replaced by this shell of a person who seemed to care more about maintaining the perfect facade than truly being there for his wife. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow as sobs racked my body. How had we come to this? How had the love and understanding we once shared disintegrated into this bitter, toxic dynamic? As I lay there, a newfound determination took root within me. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly invalidated and disrespected by the person who was supposed to be my partner in life. Enough was enough. I sat up, wiping away the tears, and reached for the journal I had been keeping over the past few years. With trembling hands, I began to document this latest incident, determined to gather evidence of Bryce's emotional abuse. The dismissive comments, the lack of empathy, the constant belittling of my struggles, I would record it all. This would be the start of my journey towards reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. I would no longer be a victim, cowering in the face of Bryce's cruelty. It was time to take a stand, to expose the truth, and to seek justice for the years of pain and neglect I had endured. The words flowed from my pen, fueled by a potent mix of anger, heartache, and a newfound sense of resolve. This was the final straw, the catalyst for the upheaval that was about to unfold. I was done being the silent, suffering wife. It was time for Bryce to face the consequences of his actions. I should have seen the signs earlier, but love can blind even the most perceptive of souls. Bryce and I had been a perfect match in the beginning, two kindred spirits, united in our hopes and dreams for the future. We'd feed off each other's energy, our laughter filling the air as we built the foundation of what we thought would be an unbreakable bond. How naive I had been. The first crack appeared shortly after our wedding, when I began exhibiting strange symptoms that no doctor could properly diagnose. The debilitating fatigue, the widespread pain, the cognitive issues. They all remained an unsolvable mystery, an invisible enemy waging war on my body and mind. At first, Bryce was sympathetic, assuring me that we would get through this together. In sickness and in health, remember, he would say, holding me close as I cried from the frustration of not understanding what was happening to me. Those tender moments became rarer as the years passed, and my condition only worsened. Bryce grew increasingly distant, frustrated by the lack of a clear solution. His patience wore thin, and the man I had fallen in love with slowly faded away, replaced by someone cold and callous. "Quit making excuses and pull yourself together," he snapped one day when I struggled to complete a simple household chore. "You're letting this supposed illness control your life." Yeah, I tried to explain, to make him understand the genuine anguish I was experiencing, but he would hear none of it. In his eyes, I had become a burden, a blight on the perfect life he had envisioned for us. Outward appearances meant everything to Bryce. He couldn't bear the thought of our family being perceived as anything less than perfect, even as our son Derek grew increasingly aware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. "Why is Dad always so angry with you?" Derek asked me once, his eyes full of concern. I forced a smile, not wanting to tarnish his image of his father. "It's nothing, sweetheart. He's just under a lot of stress at work." The lies piled up, each one a brick in the facade Bryce was so desperate to maintain. We were the perfect family, with the perfect house and the perfect life. At least, that's what we wanted the world to believe. Behind closed doors, the reality was far more sinister. "You're pathetic, you know that?" Bryce snarled at me one evening after I had spent the day bedridden, too weak and in too much pain to function. "This is just a convenient way for you to be lazy and avoid your responsibilities." His words cut deeper than any knife, reopening the wounds of inadequacy that his emotional abuse had inflicted over the years. I wanted to scream, to hurl every ounce of anguish back in his face, but the strength had long since been drained from me. So I remained silent, my tears the only outward display of the turmoil raging within. That's when I knew the man I had married was gone, consumed by his obsession with maintaining the illusion of perfection. The love and support I had once treasured had been replaced by disdain and contempt, all because I couldn't meet his warped expectations. In that moment, a small spark of defiance ignited within me, a glimmer of determination that would grow into an all-consuming blaze. I wouldn't stay trapped in this toxic cycle any longer. One way or another, I would strip away Bryce's carefully constructed facade and expose the ugliness that festered beneath. He would face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torment he had inflicted upon me. The road ahead would be arduous, but I knew in my heart that it was the only path to reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. The mask of perfection would shatter, and the truth would finally be laid bare, no matter the cost. The facade Bryce had so carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. As my health deteriorated further, it became impossible for me to keep up the charade of being the perfect wife and homemaker. Simple tasks like cooking and cleaning left me utterly drained, my body feeling like a leadweight that refused to cooperate. Of course, this only added fuel to Bryce's disdain. "What's the point of having you around if you can't even take care of basic household duties?" he sneered, surveying the pile of unwashed dishes in the sink. I wanted to explain, to make him understand the sheer effort it took for me just to get through each day, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Bryce had made up his mind about my condition long ago. In his eyes, it was nothing more than a convenient excuse. "I'm sorry," I mustered, hating how weak and defeated I sounded. "I'll try harder, I promise." Bryce scoffed and shook his head in disgust. "Save your empty promises. You've been trying harder for years, yet nothing ever changes." The venom in his words cut deep, but I remained silent, too emotionally and physically drained to engage in another fruitless argument. As the weeks passed, Bryce's insults and complaints escalated, each one chipping away at what little self-worth I had left. I found solace in my journal, pouring out the anguish and frustration that I couldn't voice aloud. It was during one of these writing sessions that Derek knocked on my bedroom door, a concerned look etched on his face. "Mom, are you okay? I heard Dad yelling at you again." I fought back the tears that threatened to spill and forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Your father's just been under a lot of stress lately." Derek didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a sadness that no child should ever have to bear. As he left, I couldn't help but wonder how much of Bryce's behavior he had witnessed over the years. Had I been naive in thinking I could shield him from the harsh reality of our crumbling marriage? That night, as Bryce slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake, my mind racing with a newfound determination. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and belittled by the man who was supposed to love and cherish me. Enough was enough. I reached for my journal, the pages now filled with a meticulous documentation of Bryce's emotional abuse. Every cutting remark, every dismissive gesture, every act of cruelty laid bare in ink. As I flipped through the pages, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was my evidence, my ammunition in the battle I was about to wage against the man who had made my life a living hell. I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife any longer. It was time to take action, to expose Bryce for the monster he had become and seek justice for the years of pain and neglect he had inflicted upon me. The first step would be to confide in my sister, Jenna. She had always been my rock, my unwavering support system through the darkest of times. With her by my side, I knew I would have the strength to face whatever lay ahead. A plan began to form in my mind, the pieces slowly falling into place. I would gather every shred of evidence, every damning proof of Bryce's vile behavior, until I had an airtight case against him. Then, and only then, would I strike, shattering his carefully constructed facade and exposing the ugliness that festered beneath. It would be a long and arduous road, but I was ready to fight. For too long, I had been the victim, cowering in fear and shame. But no more. This time, justice would be mine. Our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a joyous occasion, a celebration of the love and commitment that had carried us through 2 decades of marriage. Instead, it became a painful reminder of how far Bryce and I had drifted apart. He had insisted on going out to an upscale restaurant, wanting to maintain the facade of a happy, successful couple in front of our friends and family. I had reluctantly agreed, knowing full well that any objection on my part would only ignite another heated argument. As I slowly made my way down the stairs, the simple act of getting dressed and ready had left me utterly drained. Bryce was waiting at the bottom, drumming his fingers impatiently against his watch. "It's about time," he grumbled, eyeing my weary appearance with disdain. "We're already running late." I mustered an apologetic smile, too exhausted to offer any excuses. We made our way to the restaurant in silence, the tension between us palpable. The evening only grew more excruciating as it progressed. Bryce basked in the attention of our guests, regaling them with tales of his career successes while I sat quietly, sipping water to quell the nausea that had taken hold. At one point, our friend Jennifer turned to me with a warm smile. "Marla, you must be so proud of Bryce and everything he's accomplished." Before I could respond, Bryce cut in with a bitter chuckle. If only she put in half as much effort into our marriage as I do at work. The table fell silent, a collective tension hanging in the air. I felt the blood drain from my face as Bryce's words sank in, each one a dagger to my already fragile heart. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Bryce shook his head in mock disappointment. "Come on, Marla. We all know you've been using your little condition as an excuse to be lazy and neglect your duties as a wife." The venom in his tone was unmistakable, laying bare the contempt he harbored for me and my struggles. I wanted to scream, to hurl his cruelty back in his face, but the shock had rendered me mute. Our friends and family shifted uncomfortably, averting their gazes as the once celebratory atmosphere turned toxic. No one dared to intervene, to call out Bryce's abhorrent behavior. He leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "See? She can't even defend herself. Pathetic." Those words would haunt me for years to come, searing themselves into my memory like a brand. In that moment, everything became crystallized. The years of emotional abuse, the gaslighting, the utter disregard for my well-being. As I sat there, humiliated and defeated, something within me shifted. A fire ignited in the depths of my soul, a burning rage that had been simmering for far too long. Enough was enough. I would no longer be Bryce's punching bag, his victim to be ridiculed and demeaned at his whim. The gloves were coming off, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to his knees, to make him suffer as he had made me suffer for so long. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, my mind already plotting my vengeance. Bryce continued to revel in his cruelty, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. As we arrived home, I went straight to my room, locking the door behind me. I reached for my journal, my hands trembling, as I began to document every agonizing detail of the night's events. This would be the tipping point, the catalyst that would set my plan into motion. Bryce had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and he would pay dearly for his transgressions. I would gather every shred of evidence, every recorded instance of his emotional and psychological torture. Then, when the time was right, I would unleash it all upon him, shattering his world and leaving him to contend with the consequences of his actions. No more suffering in silence, no more being the victim. It was time for Bryce to face the wrath he had so recklessly provoked. In the days following our disastrous anniversary dinner, I could feel a shift taking place within me. The years of pent-up anger and resentment had finally reached a boiling point, igniting a fire that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Bryce, oblivious as ever, carried on as if nothing had happened. He went about his daily routine, leaving for work each morning with a casual "see you later" tossed over his shoulder. Meanwhile, I stewed in my righteous fury, meticulously documenting every instance of his cruelty in my journal. It was during one of these writing sessions that Jenna stopped by unannounced. She took one look at my reddened eyes and the turmoil etched into my features before enveloping me in a tight embrace. "Oh, Marla," she murmured, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on?" I pulled away, steeling myself against the torrent of emotion that threatened to spill forth. "It's Bryce," I began, the words tumbling out in a rush. He humiliated me, Jenna, in front of everyone at our anniversary dinner." Jenna's brow furrowed as I recounted the painful details, her expression darkening with each word. By the time I had finished, her hands were balled into tight fists, trembling with barely contained rage. "That bastard," she hissed, her eyes blazing with a protective fury. "How could he treat you like that? After everything you've been through?" I shook my head, feeling a sudden surge of determination. "I can't live like this anymore, Jenna. The emotional abuse, the constant belittling, it has to stop." Jenna nodded, her jaw set in a firm line. "You're right. Enough is enough. What are you going to do?" A plan had already begun to take shape in my mind, a meticulously crafted blueprint for revenge. "I'm going to gather evidence," I explained, my voice steady and resolute. "Every recording, every journal entry, every shred of proof of Bryce's cruelty. Then, when the time is right, I'm going to unleash it all and watch his world crumble around him." Jenna's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and admiration flickering across her features. "Marla, are you sure about this? This is a nuclear option. There's no going back once you pull the trigger." I nodded, my jaw clenched with grim determination. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Bryce needs to face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torture he's put me through. He needs to be exposed for the monster he truly is. A slow smile spread across Jenna's face, a fierce pride radiating from her very being. "Okay, sis, I'm in. Whatever you need, I've got your back." Relief washed over me, knowing that I wouldn't be facing this battle alone. With Jenna by my side, I felt an overwhelming sense of strength, a certainty that I would emerge victorious. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, gathering every scrap of evidence we could find. Journals, recordings, photographs, nothing was left out. We built an ironclad case against Bryce, one that would leave no room for doubt or denial. As our arsenal grew, so too did my sense of empowerment. The fear and shame that had once shackled me began to dissipate, replaced by a burning desire for justice and retribution. Bryce remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, carrying on with his daily routine as if nothing were amiss. He would sneer at me whenever our paths crossed, his lips curling in a contemptuous sneer that only fueled my determination. "What's the matter, Marla?" he would taunt. "Still wallowing in self-pity, I see." I would meet his gaze, unflinching, biting back the biting retort that danced on the tip of my tongue. Soon, I told myself. Soon, he would pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me. As the final pieces of our plan fell into place, I felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. The day of reckoning was fast approaching, and Bryce had no idea what was in store. He had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing that I would cower and submit to his abuse forever. But no more. This time, I would be the one holding all the cards, and Bryce would learn the true meaning of suffering. The facade he had so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one wielding the sledgehammer. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Jenna and I had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail, leaving no stone unturned in our quest for justice. It was the annual Wyatt family reunion, a gathering that Bryce had always insisted on attending, despite our crumbling marriage. This year, however, the event would serve as the perfect stage for his downfall. As we pulled into the driveway of my parents' home, I could see the familiar faces of extended family members already gathered on the lawn. Bryce plastered on his usual charming smile, ever the master of deception. "Remember, honey," he murmured, leaning in close, "we have to keep up appearances. No need to burden everyone with our personal issues." I fought back the urge to recoil from his touch, nodding in feigned agreement. Little did he know, the facade he had so carefully cultivated was about to be shattered beyond repair. We mingled with the crowd, making small talk and accepting well wishes from relatives we hadn't seen in ages. All the while, Jenna and I exchanged covert glances, silently signaling that it was time to put our plan into motion. After the initial greetings had concluded, Jenna cleared her throat, calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have a moment, please," she began, her voice ringing out across the lawn. "There's something important that needs to be addressed." Bryce shot me a quizzical look, but I remained impassive, my expression betraying nothing. "For too long, a grave injustice has been allowed to fester within our family," Jenna continued, her gaze sweeping across the gathered crowd. "An injustice that we can no longer turn a blind eye to." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd, but Jenna pressed on, undeterred. "Bryce Wyatt has been emotionally and psychologically abusing his wife, Marla, for years. Today, we're going to put an end to his cruelty, once and for all." A hush fell over the gathering as Jenna's words sank in. Bryce's face contorted in a mixture of shock and outrage, but before he could interject, Jenna was already unveiling our carefully curated evidence. Audio recordings of Bryce's vicious tirades filled the air, his voice dripping with venom and contempt as he hurled insult after insult at me. Documented journal entries detailing the years of emotional torment were passed around, laying bare the depths of his cruelty. And then, the pièce de résistance, the video footage from our anniversary dinner, capturing Bryce's public humiliation in all its excruciating detail. As the scene played out on the screen, gasps and murmurs of outrage echoed through the crowd. Bryce stood frozen, his mouth agape as the carefully constructed facade he had so meticulously maintained came crashing down around him. "How could you?" My mother's voice cut through the tension, her eyes brimming with tears. "How could you treat my daughter that way?" Bryce stammered, grasping for an excuse, but no words came. He was a cornered animal, his true nature finally exposed for all to see. One by one, family members turned their backs on him, their expressions a mix of disgust and disbelief. Bryce's once charming demeanor had been stripped away, revealing the ugly truth that had been lurking beneath all along. As the weight of his actions bore down upon him, Bryce's veneer of confidence crumbled. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for mercy, for understanding. "Marla, please," he began, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "Enough," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You've had your chance to be a decent human being, and you squandered it. Now you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Bryce opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. In that moment, he knew he had lost the respect of his family, lost the facade of perfection he had so desperately clung to, lost any semblance of control over the situation. As he slunk away, a broken and defeated man, I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. Justice had been served, and the years of suffering and humiliation had finally been avenged. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, sis," she whispered. "You took that bastard down." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. Free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to reclaim my life and dignity. As the crowd dispersed, offering words of support and encouragement, I knew that this was just the beginning. Bryce's downfall was merely the first step in a journey towards healing and empowerment, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. In the days following the explosive family reunion, the fallout from Bryce's exposure was swift and unrelenting. His life, once so meticulously constructed to project an image of perfection, lay in shattered ruins around him. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of liberation unlike anything I had experienced before. For years I had been shackled by Bryce's emotional abuse, my spirit slowly eroded by his cruelty. But now, with the truth laid bare, I was finally free. The first order of business was securing a divorce. Jenna had put me in touch with a formidable legal team, and within a matter of days the paperwork was filed. Bryce, still reeling from the public humiliation, offered little resistance. "You're making a mistake," he muttered during one of our brief encounters, his eyes downcast and defeated. "Think about what this will do to Derek." I leveled my gaze at him, feeling no shred of sympathy for the man who had tormented me for years. "I am thinking about Derek," I replied, my voice unwavering, "and I'm doing what's best for him, removing him from an environment of toxicity and abuse." Bryce flinched as if he had been struck, but I pressed on, relentless. "You've only got yourself to blame for this, Bryce. Your actions have consequences, whether you choose to acknowledge them or not." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in the wreckage of his own making. As news of our impending divorce spread, the backlash against Bryce intensified. Friends and colleagues who had once praised his accomplishments now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man exposed as an emotional abuser. Even Derek, our once doting son, could no longer bring himself to look his father in the eye. "How could you treat Mom like that?" he asked during one of their strained encounters, his voice thick with emotion. "She sacrificed everything for this family, and you just... Words failed him, but his expression spoke volumes. The hero worship he had once held for Bryce had been shattered, replaced by a profound sense of disappointment and betrayal. Bryce, for his part, tried to cling to the tattered remnants of his former life. He lashed out at me, accusing me of turning his own family against him, of poisoning their minds with lies and deceit. "You're a vindictive, spiteful woman," he snarled during one of his tirades. "You'll regret this, Marla. Mark my words." But his threats rang hollow, devoid of the power and menace they once held. I simply stared back at him, unmoved by his pathetic attempts at intimidation. "I don't regret a thing, Bryce," I replied, my voice laced with a steely resolve. "For the first time in years, I'm living in the truth, something you've clearly never been able to handle." His face contorted in a mask of rage, but I had already turned away, leaving him to wallow in his own self-pity and delusion. With each passing day, Bryce's world continued to crumble around him. His once thriving career began to unravel as clients and business partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with such a tarnished reputation. It was a sight to behold, watching this once proud man brought to his knees by the very demons he had unleashed upon me. And yet, I felt no pity, no shred of remorse for the suffering he now endured. This was justice, pure and simple, a reckoning long overdue. As the divorce proceedings neared their conclusion, I found myself reflecting on the long and arduous journey that had led me to this point. The years of suffering, the constant belittling and emotional abuse, the endless nights spent wondering where the man I had married had gone. But now, as I prepared to embark on a new chapter of my life, those memories seemed to fade into the distance. The shackles that had once bound me had been broken, and I was finally free to spread my wings and soar. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace as the final papers were signed, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and relief. "You did it, sis," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You survived the storm, and you came out stronger on the other side." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that better days lay ahead, free from the toxicity and cruelty that had once defined my existence. As I stepped out into the world, a newfound sense of empowerment coursed through my veins. I was a survivor, a warrior who had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious. And Bryce? Well, he was nothing more than a footnote in my story, a mere obstacle that had been overcome, a reminder of the strength and resilience that burned within me. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to seize it with both hands, leaving the pain and suffering of the past far behind me. A new chapter was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store. Chapter 8: A New Beginning. The divorce had been finalized, and with it, a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was officially free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to start anew and reshape my life on my own terms. Of course, that didn't mean the process was easy. There were still hurdles to overcome, lingering scars from years of torment that would take time to heal. But I was committed to the journey, fueled by a newfound sense of determination and self-worth. The first order of business was securing a favorable settlement, one that would provide me with the financial means to build the life I deserved. Jenna's legal team had proven their mettle, negotiating a generous payout that encompassed a sizable portion of our shared assets. "You earned every penny of this, Marla," Jenna assured me as we reviewed the settlement details. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded, still somewhat in disbelief that this chapter of my life was truly coming to a close. For so long, I had been trapped in a cycle of fear and self-doubt, conditioned by Bryce's emotional manipulations to believe that I deserved nothing better. But now, with the evidence of his cruelty laid bare and the law on my side, I could finally break free from those toxic thought patterns. I was worthy of happiness, of respect, of building a life on my own terms. With the financial security provided by the settlement, I made the decision to invest a portion of the funds into a cause close to my heart, a foundation dedicated to supporting others suffering from the same chronic condition that had once been the catalyst for Bryce's abuse. It was a way for me to turn my pain into purpose, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the isolation and emotional torment that I had faced for so many years. "This is amazing, Mom," Derek said, his eyes shining with pride as we toured the Foundation's newly opened headquarters. "I can't think of a better way to help people and raise awareness." I pulled him into a tight embrace, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions welling up within me. For too long, I had shielded Derek from the harsh realities of my marriage, desperate to preserve his image of his father. But now, with the truth laid bare, we were able to forge a deeper connection, built on honesty and mutual respect. "Thank you, sweetheart," I murmured, fighting back tears of joy. "Your support means everything to me." As the foundation took shape and our outreach efforts began in earnest, I found myself bearing witness to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The stories I encountered, the tales of perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity, only served to strengthen my own resolve. I was no longer the broken, downtrodden woman who had once cowered in fear of her husband's wrath. I was a survivor, a warrior who had emerged from the ashes of emotional abuse, stronger and more determined than ever before. And Bryce? Well, his fate had been sealed the moment he chose to prioritize his own selfish desires over the well-being of his family. The once powerful businessman had become a pariah, his reputation in tatters and his professional prospects all but non-existent. I caught glimpses of him from time to time, a mere shadow of his former self, disheveled, haunted by the demons of his own making. Our paths would cross, and for a fleeting moment our eyes would meet, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that now separated us. But I felt no pity, no remorse for the man who had inflicted so much pain and suffering upon me. This was the bed he had made for himself, and now he would lie in it, forever haunted by the consequences of his actions. As for me, I was focused on the future, a future that seemed brighter and more promising with each passing day. The foundation continued to grow, its reach extending to communities across the country, offering solace and support to those who had once felt so alone. And at the center of it all was a woman reborn, a phoenix risen from the ashes of emotional turmoil, spreading her wings and soaring towards new horizons. It was a new beginning, a fresh start that had been hard-won through years of struggle and perseverance. And as I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, but in the end, justice had prevailed. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth, and for that I would be forever grateful. A new chapter was unfolding, and I intended to embrace it wholeheartedly, leaving the pain and anguish of the past firmly behind me. The future was mine, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store.